The National Advisory Council on Innovation Symposium launched the South Africa Science, Technology and Innovation Indicators Report. The theme of the symposium is strengthening local innovation systems to achieve national objectives. The report is based on the South African Innovation Scorecard. The symposium is an important opportunity to facilitate discussion around the trends and future shape of the national system of innovation. Earlier, I spoke to Economist Dr Azar Jammine about what the report entails.
This is an annual report produced by the National Advisory Council of Innovation, which is appointed by the Department of Science and Technology, to reflect on all the indicators that give us an idea of how we are doing in terms of science, technology and innovation. It's an annual publication. What we have tried to do is every year improve it and make it more comprehensive and more relevant to people, anyone who is interested in innovation and seeing how it affects the economy. It has a comprehensive list of issues. It's divided into a number of different areas. Firstly, the enablers, what assists in producing greater innovation, what the government puts into education, what are the educational results. Secondly, firm-related activities, how much does the private sector actually invest in research and development. And then outputs, we try to assess how successful we've been in terms of our various innovation initiatives through things such as the technology balance of payments, which looks at how much are we relying on imported technology rather than domestic technology, etc.
You are talking about enablers, and if one were to discuss the issue of education, it is really problematic when you look at the pass rate that is introduced in schools, in as far as also the lack of interest of young people in doing math and sciences because they think it's difficult. How is that then feeding or not feeding into the effort of eventually making South Africa an innovative society?
I think what you have highlighted is one of the most critical weaknesses of the South African economy and one of the main reasons why we can't aspire to a higher economic growth rate. Because when you have 1 out of every 40 entrants into the schooling system ending up with getting 60% at least for maths in matric, which is about the minimum that is required to become functionally employable, to add value in the economy. You're talking about the majority of people coming through the schooling system not being able to produce anything worthwhile that is employable and can enable them to earn a decent income and thereby reduce the level of inequality and unemployment in the country.
When we look at the Global Competitiveness Report, South Africa is really bottom of the list when it comes to innovation. And you look at countries like China and Japan, which are highly advanced in as far as industry is concerned. Now, getting into the fourth industrial revolution, how prepared is South Africa really to be a global player?
You know, one of the ironies is that there are indeed, and the study shows them, certain pockets of excellence or opportunity. And you talk about the fourth industrial revolution. You know, the figures that are shown in this report show that there is a higher rate of ownership of mobile phones in South Africa than in virtually any other country bar Russia. And secondly, there is a relatively high rate of usage of internet amongst the general population. Now, one would have thought that if that was the case, if mobile phones and internet were so popular, we could piggyback on that to fast-track education and skills development and for South Africa to overtake many of its competitors.
And at the moment, accessibility to technology and the internet, we actually were thinking that it is a problem. Now that you are highlighting that there's high usage of cell phones in South Africa and their ownership, people have access to the internet right now. Even in rural areas, people are on Facebook. But with me running the risk of generalizing, I cannot for sure say that people don't have access to technology if they have it on their phones. I can for sure say that they don't have computers. But then if one can use their cell phones to access Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and they don't use that to their educational advantage, what can be done then to encourage this? Because communication is global.
You know, you really need to start encouraging people to learn how to count and to read and write at a level at a very early stage of schooling. And that is what I think we are missing out on. So at the end of the day, it becomes a game rather than these technological instruments become a game rather than an instrument through which people can advance themselves, because they don't have enough competency in counting or reading and writing.
When it comes to, shall I say, business tolerance in the area of industry and competition, let's bring it closer to home. You go to the Gautrain station and you find that there's a divide. People are using an Uber app to get taxis and to travel. But on the other hand, the meter taxis parked on the other roadside, and when you're a passenger, to use technology to travel, you are endangering your life because you may end up somewhere in a boot, in a charred vehicle. So now, this lack of tolerance in as far as innovation and competition is concerned in the society, definitely Uber drivers need to make money just as meter taxi drivers want to. Now, when you innovate in as far as travel is concerned with Uber, how then do you introduce that and innovate in a society like South Africa when you have a challenge of lack of tolerance?
It's a bit of a vicious circle, and it starts from the fact that we have high levels of inequality and a lot of people who are desperate to find a way of making a living. And it's a vicious circle that can only be addressed through improvements in education that enable people to bypass some of the constraints caused by the lack of education, and so that they can start doing things in a more civil way and not be jealous and not become violent against one another when they have alternative ways of doing things.
Just on a parting shot now, let's talk about the issue of policy then when it comes to education. Do you think government's policy is rather counterproductive when it comes to us wanting to advance in technology, whereas on the other hand, we are lowering the scale of the pass rates?
This was brought up at our conference this morning, the fact that we are shooting ourselves in the foot by having a very low pass rate. And conversely, we're also shooting ourselves in the foot by focusing a lot of increased expenditure on higher education development, when in fact the spending on education, on basic education, has decreased per capita by 40% in real terms over the last 8 years. So how can you generate better outcomes at higher education level when you're not spending sufficiently at basic educational level that feeds through into the higher education system?
That's Dr. Azar Jammine, who is Chief Economist at Econometrics, speaking to us about technology and innovation indicators report earlier.